If you haven't already familiarized yourself with our game of 316 Carnage Amongst the Stars, played at Spelens Hus here in Norrköping, then I urge you to visit the Adepts Play website and examine the 4 sessions presented there before this session, number 5, all in audio, because the participants are in their mid-teens and I don't want to have live video. All right, what about session 5? I'm jumping in the presumption that you are updated with the content so far. Well, this particular episode is conducted or was fought here at the planet Michelangelo. But there's more than just fighting and planets. The players at this point had already tagged into the idea that they have characters living in this brigade, this fleet of ships traveling through the stars, eliminating threats to Earth, aka wiping out anything and everything in the cosmos. And they do things like, they basically do things on ship. And most of that is player driven. So a player says, I would like to alter my combat suit and put some bootleg items together to make it more effective in some way. So we play that. And in many cases that entails discovering new NPCs. Usually, you need to talk to a guy, and that guy would be like this, and I give him a name. And then after that, other players may go to that guy or encounter them in some way, setting more and more of the scenes as just events on board ship. Starts at this point, at this session. It's been steadily increasing since the beginning, and by this session, it has turned more into the default mode of play, so that the missions sort of swoop upon them and they must now, get yanked out of their lives on board ship and participate in the mission. This is also made possible by a structural feature of the game, which is that at least one of them, in this case Sims, is ranking up about as fast as a character can. The player, Neo, is aware of how this works and says, I will use weaknesses, which makes using strengths available. And when I use strengths and, do something on the missions and get a certain amount of, kills or make my non-fighting ability check at the end of a mission, then I can rank up. And he actually has a very high non-fighting ability. Chose to make a character who actually isn't a very effective fighter. So he's sort of going on the missions, but he's also apparently good at working the system to get his promotions. So anyway, his character has now promoted up into further ranks, and where exactly he was for this one, whether he was still a lieutenant, I think he was bucking for captain at this point. Well, what that means is that his character is played a little bit separately from the others on board ship. So he has contact with different people, he gets different information, and we actually role play precisely what he orders the Sergeant Buck and the corporals to some extent, but Sergeant Buck, he actually orders him what to do in terms of, managing the rest of the player characters. And he also gets kind of his own briefing and then decides what goes into the briefing that the others will receive. So Neo is now in a very different position than the other players, and play itself, therefore, everybody is aware, because we're all at the table, everyone is aware that there is crisscrossing information and different levels of power at work in just how they end up being on a mission and what the mission actually entails. So in this particular case on Michelangelo, this had a lot to do with a planet where they were told that there was no danger whatsoever of radiation, and that their suits were heavily protected against radiation, and that radiation doesn't really do anything bad to you anyway. So clearly, I mean, what I found was that the planet, through my rolls, it had humanoids. One of the options was mutated humans, and that the planet is radioactive, and the humanoids had the ability of ambush. And so I collected some fun pictures of, irradiated wastelands, and had fun explaining when they arrived on the planet, and also in terms of the mission, how the building, the natural formation that curiously looks like a nuclear reactor, is actually their destination. Well, we also see some changes in the characters. About this point, I think, is when everybody finally settles on the characterizations, the reputations that the characters have. And let's see, Van der Linde, who is the one who will remain until, as of this recording, we've played 8 missions now, has never made it past Trooper. He's never ranked up. And that's even with, a good non-fighting ability roll, and with plenty of kills and stuff like that. He's just totally hard luck dude as far as ranking up is concerned. And it was at this session, the 5th, that I think the player Theo settled upon unpredictable. Now that sounds like just sort of a nothing reputation that just means he can do anything, but he's actually played it fairly understandably. Van der Linde is unpredictable in a particular way. Now, he also desperately attempts to keep educating himself by reading the field manual and trying to get information and stuff like that, and begins at this point to develop a little bit more curiosity about these missions and what sort of world or life he's living. So to continue, this is also when it has become clear that Arvid's character, Morgan, is a little weird. He's been weird ever since he started collecting, alien glands and stuff like that, but he becomes extremely oriented, as he first showed, I think, in the 4th mission, toward gathering all sorts of dangerous substances and squirreling them away. So I don't think we've yet learned in this one his character's backstory that he explains through strengths and weaknesses, but it's also clear that everybody's kind of looking sideways at Morgan, whose reputation is trustworthy, and he often backs up the other characters when they do something dangerous. But we're all sort of starting to look sideways at him and wonder, what is this weird dude about? Nils has kept Buck at Good-Hearted Rascal and was absent in the prior mission. Or was it this one that he was absent for the second part of the prior mission. I think I'm getting my numbers of missions and sessions mixed up a little bit, but anyway, it was on the planet Monet, and he had been dragged underground by the reptile people, or the insectoid people, scorpion people, and had been dragged underground and rescued somewhat summarily, kind of like a sack of potatoes, since the player wasn't present for that part of the play. But in this one, he actually has some very interesting outcomes. Briefly, he gets the hell irradiated out of him, and so ends up in the sick ward, which turns into a major thing for the following session. But Nils kept Buck's reputation as Good-Hearted Rascal, which has been a little hard for him to play to some extent, but at this point it was becoming clearer that he's the sergeant to the men, and he's very indulgent to them. He lets them get up to their no good stuff as long as it's not threatening the mission. So his characterization is starting to be, reliable and understandable when he makes a decision of some kind. And let's see, whom am I leaving out, and who else would I be leaving out, except for Crazy Cooper, who maintained his reputation of crazy, and then amended it about this point or just before to batshit insane. And Nils Philip's character, Philip has happily, indulged himself in this, so that Cooper is now lighting everybody on fire with his flamethrower by accident, or it's to the point where to sometimes the other characters kind of have to restrain him. So he's always getting up to something, and he's embedded deeply in the criminal activities on board. So all of this is proceeding wonderfully. Now, the mission itself, of course, the humanoids are in fact Terran humans, so this is not an enemy planet, but something has gone horribly, horribly wrong with nuclear energy. Who knew? And so now everybody's irradiated in these kind of oozy mutant, lurching monsters. And the biggest one that they had to deal with at the reactor itself, which they were supposed to either to defuse or shut down in some way, was the monster glob version. So they all quickly realized that these were not some alien threat, that this was actually an Earth planet, or an Earth-owned and operated planet on which something had gone horribly wrong, and that they had been put in harm's way to just go down there and shut this thing down. And who cares if they got, shot full of irradiation. I believe at one point I even had somebody who breached their suit, when they chose to breach their suit or have their suit take the damage. And they also, had brought in radiation detectors. I think it was Neo who had, his leading character make sure to get some kind of radiation detectors prior to the mission. And of course, they all went off like fire alarms the second that they got out of their drop pod. So anyway, somebody, I think this was what happened to Nils' character, when their suit was breached. I called for a non-fighting ability check, and he failed it, and the answer was, well, now you have cancer. So anyway, that's very charming and gross and all the rest of it, but insensitive even. But they are in a world of shit, frankly, and the players very much upon this episode really knew it. Well, play has proceeded since then. We've been through many, many other consequences to the brigade itself, and we've also dealt with quite a few different planets. But what's very important, and one of the reasons why I didn't just skip this one, is that the next session is a continuation, technically with a new mission, but the radiation and the poor judgment and planning on part of, the entire management of the 16th Brigade of the 3rd Army, basically led to a whole bunch of people coming back from that planet just full of science fiction radiation and its effects. So, therefore, plenty of mayhem ensues next time on the brigade itself. So this was a hugely consequential session in terms of swerving just what the brigade even is.